Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy, and I almost forgot what the name of the show was. I had a brief moment of panic. Oh my gosh, it's been a week. And my guest today is Emily Clark. Hi, Emily,
Hi, Heather. Thank you for having me back.
who has also had a week by all accounts. So
Yeah,
we're going to
I
see what
feel
we can do.
I feel like, every week has been a week these days.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, you're just starting a semester. I'm 5 weeks into a semester, but I still haven't hit a rhythm. Like I still
Mhm.
and like it's weird. But anyway, we're going to talk about some work Emily's doing about the child's right to participate, right? Is that how
Yeah.
you're using how the language you're using? So I'm
hmm
going to just read a quote about rights and then we'll jump in.
Okay.
All right, so this comes from a book called Play and Health in Childhood: A Rights-Based Approach, edited by Julie Whitaker and Allison Tonkin. And this is a chapter that Allison Tonkin wrote. And she says, children manage to make a very complex concept with a deep and rich history sound simple. They appreciate and value the importance of rights, stating, you don't just want them, you need them. When asked who is responsible for looking after human rights, children also state, basically all of us, children and adults, so we can know about them and they can help us and we can ask for help if we need it.
I
Good
love
work, children.
that. Honestly, I don't know what I'm doing here. The kids have already done the work, right?
You'll probably get one to write your dissertation.
I would love that. Please help me.
Yeah. So tell us just tell us about the child's right to participation or to participate, whichever one you want.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I think we really struggle with conceptually in the US because we're really pretty spot on about like children's right to protection. Like we understand child protection is a
Mm-hmm.
right. And we have a lot of laws and regulations about that, both as far as inside and outside of education. And then, there's these other categories of rights called like provision rights, which are sort of thinking about you have the right to education, you have a right to a home, you have a right to food, those sorts of things. And we're pretty, I mean, I wouldn't say we're good on those things. We understand them.
We at least pretend to.
We pretend to care as a society
Yeah,
about children and families having those things.
yeah.
Um, and then there's this, sort of category of participation rights, which is really your own ownership over your life and the decisions that you make and the things that happen to you and getting to have a say in those things. And that's something that we really struggle with as an American society, both
Mm-hmm.
in the classroom and out of the classroom. Really thinking about the idea that children should be treated as fully human
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be controversial, but is becoming more and more so these
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's what my kind of work is
Okay.
diving into. What does this mean in our classroom spaces, and how do we create spaces where both children and teachers are seen as just a little more human?
Yeah. So so can we start with, pretend we're writing like a white paper or something, start with a problem statement. Like what is it that is happening or that you see or don't see that made you think this is the work I need to do?
Mm. I feel like so often our schools and our early childhood settings are really institutional.
Yeah.
I think about like 3-year-olds lining up to walk down the hall
Right.
and everyone having to eat snack at the exact same time in the exact same place. And there are all these sort of comparisons you can make between schools and prisons, in these sort of
Yeah.
institutionalized settings. And I really feel like that's so dehumanizing.
Yes.
And that's not what any of us want. That's not how teachers want to spend their days.
Right.
That's not what parents want for their children, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not what children want for themselves. So it
Yeah.
really just got me thinking about, you know, this isn't the only way. It doesn't have to be like this.
Yeah.
And as I sort of started diving into that, I was like, wait, there's already like international human rights treaties about this exact thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Wait, the rest of the world is already doing this?
Darn. and they beat us again. Well, so I read it was an article in Exchange in the early
Mhm.
90s, probably, and then part of a collection of articles that Jim Greenman put together into a book called Places for Childhood. And one of the articles, the one I was kind of talking about, sorry, I'm a podcaster, was called How Institutional Are You? And I remember
Mm,
reading that, and for me, it just made sense. Like he's talking about, he's talking about how in total institutions, the whole is the only thing that matters, like getting the group through everything smoothly, and power hierarchy, hierarchies of power,
mhm.
and so it is stuff like someone might have just heard what you said, and 3-year-olds lining up in lines to go somewhere, that's not dehumanizing, but it is. Right,
Mhm.
if we fail to see the individuals, or if we are requiring them to be still and silent and voiceless through the
Right.
process, um and if it does become uh leader and silent follower, then that's absolutely dehumanizing, and our whole days can be like that without us
Mhm.
even knowing. Like we could have the most
Absolutely.
caring heart, but we fall into traditional ideas and scripts that become dehumanizing.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many logistics that go on in a day in the classroom, and
For
there can be
sure.
so many, all of those transitions, all of those things to navigate. And when you have, 25 kids in a classroom with two teachers, you know, it essentially is asking you to create an
Yes.
institution because
Yeah.
it's not a human-centered space when we sort of have these parameters that are already beyond what any of us would want to be teaching in.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think there's just a lot of this understanding of like what would this restructuring look like? What would it mean to sort of share that control
Hmm.
over their lives with young children, and especially in the United States where we don't have any maternity leave or family
Yeah.
leave policies. Children are going into early childhood at 6 weeks old.
I had a baby when I did family child care. Her mom was a grad student and couldn't do any
Mhm.
time off, and that baby started when at 10 days old.
Oh my gosh.
Um, that's nuts, right? She's
Yeah.
in her 20s now, probably. That's weird. I haven't thought about that in so long, but yeah, that would have been 2000. So, but and it broke mom's heart. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I only had four children with me, and husband and kids around to help if I needed help. But how terrifying to be a parent and think I've got to make this decision and leave this brand new human
Yeah.
in a system.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, we know infants, toddlers, preschoolers, all the way up, they're spending so much time in our care. And so what that care looks like really matters. And, early childhood teachers then are really these gatekeepers
Hmm.
for young children's human rights and what that
Ooh,
looks like.
yeah. So if someone is not familiar with gatekeeping, what does that mean? I mean, it sort of lends itself, the metaphor, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I
What
mean, I guess when
gatekeepers?
when I'm thinking about teachers as gatekeepers, sort of for children's human rights, they are, uh, there's that power dynamic
Uh-huh.
there, right? Like they are bigger than the children. They are more powerful than the children. They are
Hmm.
the ones who get to make all of these decisions about the children's lives. And so the teachers can use that power role to kind of redistribute power towards sharing rights and
Hmm.
supporting rights, or that power role can be used to really continue that dehumanization. So it's
Yeah.
sort of like they're, a gatekeeper or a door
Hmm.
almost to having that open or closed. And I think
Yeah.
it's something that we don't really consider how much power we have, especially when teachers often feel like they themselves don't have any power
Yes.
in the classroom.
Hmm.
But that power compared to the child's power is also inherently sort of what not right.
Unbalanced. Let's say
Unbalanced.
unbalanced.
Like
That
I've
was
got a
beautiful.
teeter-totter going on in my head.
I'm glad it's not just me. Yeah, I think about this a lot. I think about this every time I do like a workshop or a, any kind of speaking in front of a group,
Mhm.
or when I'm teaching my students, because you can see the disequilibrium when you start to talk this way,
Yeah.
on their faces. These are all people. I was a child care center director. I did lots of interviews for staff. I never heard one person come in and when I said, why are you interested in this job, they said, well, I just really can't wait to create a prison like system.
Right.
Because they're not creating the system, right? They're coming in with their
Exactly.
heart and their brain and their intention, but the system is already there
Yeah.
and forcing them to sort of fit I
Conform,
guess. Yeah,
you know?
conform.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, neither one of us has words.
No, disequilibrium. That was a good
It's a
one.
good thing we're both here, so we can give each other our forgotten words. So I think there just are very few people who wake up in the morning rubbing their hands together thinking, how can I ruin things for children today?
100%.
um but if we don't hear things like what you're saying and think about it and move through that, I'm not like that defense,
Hmm.
it will never change.
Yeah, and I think often we also live in this system, right? Like
Yes.
we all went to school, we all had
Yeah.
different early childhood experiences. And so it's, normal is just whatever you're used to. It's
Hmm.
like from Handmaid's Tale, I think. But
All right. All right.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Um, that actually concerns me a lot these
I
days.
know. Yeah, I
Um,
had to stop watching a long time ago.
But I think, there's this uh, understanding of like we come into early childhood spaces and like, yeah, we do the themes and we do the circle time and like these are just this is how it is. This is
Mhm.
how it's always been. And I think a lot of new teachers come into the classroom and if they don't have a really strong mentor
Yeah.
there who's really talking about child-centeredness and humanness,
Hmm.
then they're just going to get that cycle repeating of this is how it's always been.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Well, and in my experience, higher education doesn't help them be
No,
prepared for that. We're
no, it
we're
doesn't.
very focused again, unless we think differently about it and make some changes. We're very just focused on content delivery and classroom management,
Mhm.
and those are the things that create.
And classroom management is, of course, often institutionalizing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think um, when I think, okay, what's like the baby step? Um, I think one of the most powerful things we could do in early childhood classrooms before school years, is to get rid of the 9 to 11 mentality. Learning happens from 9 to 11, and our whole
Mm,
day is rotating around that. And during that day, I have to have tight control, or during that time, I have to have tight
right.
control. And I think
And the
if
rest
we
of the time, I don't have to care about, right? I
Right.
just
And I think if
that.
we were forced to spread things out through the whole day and think differently about the delivery or the teaching performance,
Mm.
um, that would really shake us up in a way that we would have to think.
Yeah.
Um, just think differently about everything just by saying, I'm not doing 9 to 11 is learning time
Right.
anymore.
And that's it. Nobody's learning anything the rest of the day.
No, that's not exactly what I meant. But
No, but I know what you mean as far as like here, we're going to do our center rotations
yeah,
and everyone's going to do their literacy worksheet and
yeah.
on and on. But yeah, it was interesting. So I had the joy, really truly joy of working with a group of early childhood educators this summer and some
Uh-huh,
focus groups on this research project looking at children's participation.
uh-huh,
And I had 10 educators and we had three focus groups each week, or not each week, three in a row for 3 weeks.
uh-huh.
Words again. And there were five in each group, and they were from all over the US. And it was really amazing to see, just the ways that they were shaping their own understandings of participation
Mhm.
and questioning these systems and really bonding together over this work. And it was really powerful. I'm just working my way through all the data
Uh-huh,
now. But just to hear some of the things they were saying about the pushback that they get, so even people who are trying to change these systems,
mhm.
are really drowning. And, one of the things we talked about was sort of the current US climate was coming up a lot as far as when we're talking about children's rights. We're talking about participation, but we also need to be talking about their safety at this
Yeah.
point, in a country that doesn't value many people's lives. So that came up a lot. And then also just thinking about, you were saying teacher education, like a lot of them were saying they'd rather have someone join their center who doesn't have a degree because they don't
Absolutely.
have to deprogram them.
That when I was a director, that was if you're I'll hire for disposition, and then we'll get you
Hmm.
the degree if the degree is required for the position. Will But absolutely, I agree with that one because you
Yeah.
don't have to unlearn as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's big flaws. And I think, a lot of my work is quite critical of systems.
Hmm.
But what I always want to highlight is like the people within those systems
Yes.
are working their asses off
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
for children and doing this work, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah. So maybe this is backwards. I don't know, but will you hopefully, I mean, this is a research thing, right? Will you define the participation, like when you're using the word participation in this context, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, that's part of this study,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right? So
Okay.
this study is kind of about this work is not being done in the research world in the US. It's being done a lot internationally. So
Uh-huh.
my sort of researcher brain was like, well, I can't really talk about participation. Like I can't really look for it in the classroom until we know what it is
Right.
in the US context. And so that was sort of taking me back to like, well, let's sit together and define this. So
Hmm.
that's the study is about co-defining children's participation in the classroom,
Okay.
sort of compared to international standard definitions, and then also thinking about, actually in the classroom, what are those tiny moments where we see it, where we feel it, and what are
Yeah.
those the tensions that come with doing the work to support children's participation
Hmm.
rights.
Yeah. And you talked, I think this was off mic, about maybe it was just at the beginning of the episode. This is going to be the best one yet. About their right to say no, how that has to be an important piece of this
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah, and that's something that I think in the sort of international scope of thinking about children's participation rights is also really not discussed. Like we think about supporting participation and promoting participation and trying to make our spaces places where children want to engage
Hmm.
and how to get them to come to circle and sort of all of these things, which are really, really great and super important. But there's also this flip side of this that, a child saying no is not a poor choice.
Hmm.
A child saying no is also exercising their human rights,
Right.
to make decisions
Sure.
about themselves and what they choose to or choose not to participate
Yeah.
in. And I think, that came up in this study this co-defining study as well, is how do we work with that as teachers in a classroom with a lot of children who are sort of working towards this goal of getting everyone to say yes. How do we
Uh-huh.
honor that no, and make space for that and hold space for that, which I think is really challenging, but really important.
Yeah. Um, I think if we allowed children to say more no more often, our job would become easier and more
Mhm.
enjoyable. And maybe it's because of the shift it would require within us to be more comfortable saying no. But I think because we um uh so I'm doing some work with old episodes of the show, and
Uh-huh.
there's one where the conversation is about how adults engage in conflict with children in the name of like behavior management or behavior
Hmm.
guidance. And I think that's what happens so often. We hear no and we see it as our job to turn it, like you said, into a yes
Right.
instead of trying to understand and the no or just accept the no. It is
Right.
really hard for adults to undo centuries of puritanism.
Yeah. And it's interesting
Allow
because
that.
we think about it like we expect children to say yes or to everything we ask them, but
until a
we say
stranger comes
no
in.
to
Yeah.
90% of what
Yes.
children ask us in a day,
Yes.
and that's perfectly fine,
Yeah.
societally.
Uh-huh.
So it's really thinking about, again, how can you reshift that power dynamic there to be a little more supportive of everyone's human rights? And I
Hmm.
think, something that comes up a lot is like, well, teachers are human too.
Hmm.
And I wish that teachers were treated more as
Right.
human because certainly they're not. But I think we are given this sense, and I'm not sure where it comes from as a society, but that if we give children rights or if we give anyone rights, that we're giving something up ourselves.
Right.
There's that
It's
sort of
that
panic, yeah, that there's
that
not enough
meme that
rights to
it's
go
it's not
around.
pie.
Exactly. When
Yeah.
actually, when we are supporting children to express and have access to their human rights, we're also creating spaces in which we can honor our own. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important. These like humanizing spaces
Hmm.
are ones in which both teachers and children can have this give and take and can talk about their needs and their wants and make decisions that honor, their emotional regulation on both sides.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I think that it's one of just another one of those sort of false dichotomies. Like it doesn't have to be teachers' rights or children's rights.
Right.
We want to be creating spaces where everyone feels like they can be their whole authentic self and that they can make decisions for themselves and
Hmm.
with themselves.
Yeah.
Um, I talk a lot about like interdependence. That independence is not the goal for teachers
Hmm.
or children, classrooms where that interdependence is really shared and as a community you rely on each other.
Hmm.
That piece is really important for supporting rights.
Hmm. Interdependence is such a hard conversation to have with people.
Mm,
Um, because I mean, culturally in the States, it's your own bootstraps or nothing,
right.
so often. But we are, again, conditioned or scripted in education that our whole purpose is to create completely independent beings, which is a myth, right? We want
Yeah.
standardized, independent beings at the end of the factory line. And none of us live that way.
Right.
None of us live that way in real life.
Yeah. And I think that, we often get tricked into this idea that, children need to be controlled. They need to be helped through everything. They need to have the decisions made for them because they're not independent.
Yeah.
But no adult is independent
No.
in all of their relationships. Interdependence is a condition of being human. It's not unique to children.
Right.
It's a part of having relationships and being in community that we all have this give and take and
Right.
reliance on each other, and that's not something we need to shame or teach out of children,
Hmm.
but actually something we'd all be a lot better off if we
Yeah.
were understanding in
Yeah.
each other.
It's, that there's the phrase, and I wish, or the proverb, and I wish I could remember the full ending that Kisa Marx always tacks on, but it takes a village to
Hmm.
raise a child. And I mean, that's what it's not that we're giving our children to the village, it's that we really just all need each other
Yeah,
to get through this. And
right.
I don't know, you're probably not old enough to remember this, but when Bill Clinton was president in the 90s, and Hillary, as first lady, wrote her "It Takes a Village" book. The
Hmm.
outrage, the outrage at the idea, um, was intense and mean.
Yeah,
When we're just suggesting that we need each other.
right. And it's also just like we are a village.
Uh-huh.
You
Uh-huh.
know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it takes a village and we are one or we can be one. And I think that's the shift in the classroom,
Yeah.
when we're talking about how do we open those doors, how do we open those gates to supporting children's rights, is like, what does community look
Yeah.
like? And I think we have so few examples of that um, in our modern society.
But yeah, we have. adults, I've been thinking about adult, just my own personal community for a long time lately, or for a lot lately. We have adults who do not feel like parts of community, expected to create community with children. That's a really tough ask.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think
Um,
as a part of a community, like you also have to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, right?
yeah,
Like that's a part of it.
yeah.
I'm a part of our community garden and I have to go and rake out the mulch that we've just got
Hmm.
delivered this weekend on Saturday morning when I'd rather sleep in, right?
Yes, yeah.
But like what I get out of that community benefits me enough that I
Hmm.
want to put in that work. Like
Yeah.
I want to. And I think we forget sometimes that children are also very capable of wanting to do for others,
Hmm.
and giving of themselves to others. And
Hmm.
so I think when we can build classrooms in which we allow and encourage children to give of and to others, and teachers to do that same
Yeah,
thing in this really reciprocal way, that's where we're going to see like the joy come back.
yeah. It's really interesting because everything you just talked about, children wanting to do and being willing and able to do, is probably on a list of social skill standards somewhere, right?
Right?
But we look at because it's on a list of standards, we think, well, then I must be in charge of teaching this skill
Uh-huh.
instead of it comes back to the image of the child, right?
Yeah.
What do we really
100%.
think the child is doing in our space, or can do in our space, or should
Mhm.
do? Because all those things you described, we would see most of the time.
Yeah.
Some children need help and support and a little modeling, of course, but there's no curriculum package that's going to support all of those things in the way that just authentic community
Right.
would.
Yeah. And you can't script that
Yeah.
authentic community.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
can have a circle time where, you get out this script and you say, "Oh, little Johnny is supposed to give little Susie his teddy bear."
yeah,
That's not real.
right.
One of the participants in my study was talking about in her space, we were sort of talking about how do you navigate these tensions between like the individual and the group, and what does that look like? And she was talking about how one little boy had this special chair. There was a special chair in her classroom, and everyone loved it. And this little boy really loved it. Like, and it was so difficult for him if anyone else was sitting in the
Oh,
chair.
uh-huh.
And, the teacher tried to talk around like, well, if no one else is sitting in it, it's okay for someone else to sit in it. Like, it is in our classroom, it's in our community. And so they had sort of gone back and forth about that. And what she found was that as she sort of stepped away from being in this rule maker position, the children were like, you know what? It's okay. Like, it's okay if it's just his chair.
Oh,
Like, they
uh-huh.
just naturally came to this space where they recognized that chair was really important for him right now.
Uh-huh.
And they just let it was just became sort of his chair. And it
Amazing.
wasn't anything they were coached to do. Um, they just recognized that the relationship with this child was more important than this
Mm-hmm.
chair. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's such a brilliant moment of like the capability and humanity of children that we wouldn't see if we were constantly making rules about who had
Right.
to be where. But also just speaks to like this sense of community and this sense of interdependence. And, yes, we all have to give up a little bit for each other, but isn't that
Mm-hmm.
worth having relationships and being
Yeah.
human?
Yeah.
And you couldn't replicate that in another classroom. I'm sure it would have gone a different way, in a million different spaces. You can
Mm-hmm.
imagine that. But I think that the just the allowing children to make those decisions, and to share in that sort of power can be really powerful,
Mm-hmm.
for the group.
Mm-hmm. So I know you said you're still kind of compiling and going through all
Mm.
the research data, or the data that you've gotten. Has anything come up? This will be real short if the answer is no. Has anything come up about, like, thinking about the language we use, or our kind of professional vernacular, and how that
Ooh,
impacts the ideas
interesting.
or our
We
practices?
didn't talk a lot about language
Uh-huh.
specifically. Um, we talked a lot about sort of beliefs
Okay,
about children
sure.
and classrooms, and a lot of conversation sort of about adult discomfort,
Hmm.
and how that can be an area that forces us to hold back
Hmm.
on children's rights, or just sort of like giving yourself the chance to pause and be like, wait, why did I say no to that? That's
Right.
completely reasonable. Allowing yourself to backtrack, but also like the the interactions with other adults in the spaces
Oh,
and sort
okay.
of the differences between like the appearances of what it looks like in the classroom and the actuality of how it feels in the
Oh,
classroom,
yeah.
and sort of that navigating that, where just because something looks all pretty and perfect, we know doesn't mean that it's
Right.
really a human-centered environment. And
Yeah.
equally, just because something looks a little chaotic doesn't mean that
Yeah.
everything's falling apart.
Yeah. That's
So
such a
yeah.
conversation right now, right?
Mhm.
The beautiful presentation versus the chaotic uh play residue kind of
Yeah.
conversations.
And I
Yeah.
think, thinking about how something can often appear chaotic when it's actually really carefully orchestrated. But if it's
Yeah.
carefully orchestrated by and for children, then
Uh-huh.
through an adult lens, that might look very different than what we would expect had the adults orchestrated
For
the
sure.
expectations of that space.
Yeah. I used to, when I did tours with like families who were looking at the center to see if that's where they wanted to bring their
Hmm.
child. Um, I got to a point where I had to do a little, before we went to the classroom, I would be like, it's going to look really chaotic. If you just look in and see, it's going to be 23-year-olds living life, right? But
Yeah.
if you look at this little corner of 3-year-olds and this little group at the table and this little group over here, it's actually not right if you focus on the life that's
Yes.
happening and not the big picture and the noise.
Yeah.
It can make a big difference because
And
they
I
would
think,
just be like so overwhelmed.
yeah, exactly. We talked kind of about like what's the teacher's role in all this. And one
Yeah.
of the things that came up was this, this role of almost a translator of practice to the community, to
Mm-hmm.
parents, to other adults, even between children themselves, but sort of this understanding of like there's a there's a role for someone to really explain what's happening here, and why this looks maybe different than you would expect,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm actually thinking behind the scenes when I'm making these decisions.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you're right. We glance into a classroom, we're like, oh my gosh, why can't that teacher get her act together? Like her kids are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
there's a method to that madness, and being able to translate that effectively in a way that gets other educators and other administrators to buy in
Mm-hmm.
is really powerful.
Yeah, we just talked about this in the class I'm teaching this semester yesterday,
Ooh.
because it's a literacy class, and we every week they have an assigned like reading or a video or podcast or something, and then they have a guide that they complete so that when they come to class they're ready to
Yeah.
discuss. And they turn it in a little bit beforehand so I can look at it and see what I need to be prepared for. And so, um, one of them asked, "How do I make these changes in that were these changes without getting in
Hmm.
trouble at work?" And you may have seen it, so I posted it on my nerd page, the question, so just to get some other people's feedback. But that was the number one thing, was really practice translating what's happening, really practice,
Hmm.
like literally say it out loud and
Yeah.
practice it, so that when someone comes in who doesn't see through the chaos, quote unquote chaos, or someone comes in who doesn't understand why you don't have the hammer down on everything, um, you're ready with that translation for
Yeah.
them. And if you don't think about it intentionally and sort of practice it, then the emotions are going to take over when someone comes in with that disequilibrium, and
Yeah.
you're not going to be as comfortable doing the translating, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. And, part of me feels like, should we have to do this? Like, should
Yeah.
we have to vouch for absolutely everything, but also part of me feels like any teacher who's really intentionally cultivating that chaos is already doing that. Like
And
that.
loves doing it.
Yes, and that practice of thinking intentionally about
Uh-huh.
what's happening and why, that's going on in your head constantly
Right.
already. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of, you know, being intentional not only about doing it, but about sharing it,
Yeah.
and getting that out there.
Yeah.
There's not enough models of, beyond traditional practice.
Hmm. That's true. And it seems scary. I mean, I just think a lot of people feel fear about making that kind of a move,
Yeah.
even if they really want to make that kind of move.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it's not what we're taught to
Hmm.
do. We're taught to, that children are small, wild adults that need to be controlled
Little
and
walking
developed.
deficits.
Right? Yes, little walking deficits that, need our fierce guidance and protection. And
Uh-huh.
there's sort of some controversy. I was just listening to a talk yesterday, by a professor in, oh gosh, I want to say Norway, who was talking about sort of the idea of the best interests of the child, and
Mm,
that can actually be problematic. I mean, clearly Norway is in a completely different scope
sure.
of their early years practice than
Yeah,
we are.
yeah.
But that can actually be really a limiting rights practice.
Oh.
If we hold it in a space where we assume as the adults that we automatically know what's best
Oh. Hmm.
for the children. So, rather than having it as like an overarching statement, really again, taking it back to that intentionality in
Hmm.
each of those decisions about, have I actually ask the child what they might think is best.
Hmm. Right.
Am I just making this snap decision because I'm an adult and I've made it 75,000
Right.
times this week? Um, or, am I really considering and giving due weight
Mm.
to that consideration of the child's needs and wants?
Oh, that's so interesting. Um, yeah, or observing, just spending time observing
Yeah.
and focusing on being in relationship with individual children so that you can learn
Hmm.
what that interest might be or what they don't need from you, I think is also important and hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it like wearing coats.
Uh-huh. Huh?
Like there will be times, absolutely, when an adult needs to make the decision that it's in the best interest of the child to wear this coat.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are also times, like October, when maybe the child actually can make that decision.
Hmm.
When I think when we define the rules by these non-human parameters, um, and don't leave space in those systems for human autonomy, that's where we
Hmm.
kind of get caught up. Like if
Hmm.
it's a sunny day and the child is, they're on the bikes, they're running around, they're on the swings, they're going to be hot. Like,
Right.
do we trust them to make that best decision for their own body on,
Hmm.
on this day and this moment? And so much of it comes back to that trust, or am I putting my trust in a policy that says it's October and every child must go outside with their coat zipped up? You know?
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a million little examples of things that happen like that, like the snack table.
Hmm.
Can a child eat a snack when they're hungry? Or do they have to eat a snack at 10 o'clock because it's 10 o'clock and that's when, it's our turn to have the snack table?
Hmm.
Is it in the best interest of the child to eat? Yes, of course, but
Yeah.
probably really in their best interest to eat when they're hungry.
I was just going
Um,
to say, yeah, I think that's one of the things that I have started talking about really since reading Carol Garboden Murray's Illuminating Care,
mhm.
which opened my eyes about a lot of things that it was one of those books where it was like, yeah, I should have known this already. I should have already been.
Right.
But
Sometimes you just need
that,
somebody to say it and you're like, oh
yes, but
shit.
that idea that part of what we're responsible for, quote unquote, is helping children identify and recognize and respond to their own body's cues. But so much because we are in this institutionalized script and everybody's doing things at the same time, we're teaching them to ignore their cues, and sometimes we're teaching them that their body's cues are bad.
Hmm.
And that's a really tricky place to be if
Yeah.
we really slow ourselves down and think about it.
It's huge. And I think this is all complicated by the fact that we live in an extremely litigious society
Yeah.
where, teachers are at risk for, reading the wrong book in the
Yeah.
classroom, much less, having a child without their coat
Yeah.
who, the
But
parent decides they might have been chilly.
yeah, are we in that litigious society in terms of early childhood, or do we just make that assumption because of a narrative we've heard? Because
Hmm.
I've never met anyone who's been sued or talked to me about being sued for their practice with young children. And in Rusty Keeler's book about risky play, he speaks to that a little bit.
Really, I love that. And I think that's really important to push
I
back
mean,
on
the
because,
potential is there, I guess, so we still
yeah,
have to be aware.
yeah.
But I don't I haven't seen anything that really says, yeah, people are getting sued for not putting coats on
Right.
kids.
I think that it's a cultural understanding, like
Right.
it's a
Okay. Yeah.
cultural fear.
Right.
And I think what
So
we
it's driving
do,
us whether it's really happening
yeah.
or not. Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think what we do see is endless, emails, I think,
Yes.
from unhappy
For sure.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just talking to oh, it was so nice. A former student took me out to dinner the other night and
Oh,
I was talking to her about some stuff. And I was remembering all the times that like there was a mom who was upset with something I'd done, didn't like the way I responded, and then sent dad in the next day. Like I was like, I'm not really scared of dads. You can keep sending him in, but it's not going to change much. um which is not related other than that it reminded me of that story where we were in the
yeah. So I think
conversation.
I
But
think that is that fear, right? And fear is like the poison to trust.
yes, yeah,
And it all, is sort of countered or mediated by those
yeah,
relationships. When we have strong relationships with families and we can do that translating for
hmm,
them, that really combats a lot of that fear. And I
yeah,
think that around risky play, we've seen huge growth in that area,
hmm,
which is really great. And I think that, we need to do that work around children's rights as
right,
well.
for sure. And I think even if there isn't a lot of actual suing happening, none of us want to be the first. None of us want to be the one who starts the
I'm
real
sure someone's
trend
going
of
to listen to this and be like, no, no, I got sued. I got this. I got
yeah. And that's fine. I'm not saying I know everyone who works in early childhood, but I don't know that any. Maybe I know one person who got sued, and I don't know. And I got, as a center director, I got tangled up in uh like a child welfare thing where a parent
Mhm.
didn't think that I had responded
Right.
in the right way.
Licensing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So there's all that. There's risk. The risk is real. I just sort of went off on a curiosity
No, but I
during
think it
that.
is important to question because, all of my work is really sort of about looking at like our assumptions about children and
Yeah,
digging into those. And we can let things that are social constructions have so much power over us,
yeah,
you know,
yes,
if
yeah.
we don't notice that they're there. I mean, that's systemic racism in a
That's right.
in a nice little neat package. If
Hmm,
you don't know it's there, you're not seeing the ways that it's impacting
hmm,
everyone's life every day.
yeah.
Um,
And children are like, how do I want to say this? The ultimate intersectional at risk, I guess. Like they
mhm.
already are so vulnerable, and their rights are already sort of not freely given or recognized. But then you add in that children can also be all of these other marginalized
Yeah,
ways of living and being. Um, then that adds layers of
absolutely. I
risk.
mean, children are, as a category, an oppressed group in
Yes,
many
yeah,
ways. And I know that's probably a controversial statement, but
yeah.
I'll
Just
stand by
saying
it.
it. Yeah.
And when you layer that with
Yep.
multiply marginalized identity,
Yep.
children with
See, you said
disability,
it so much better than I did. Yeah. Uh-huh.
different socioeconomic, racial, ethnic identities,
Hmm.
they are even more at risk of having their human rights trampled.
Right.
And so it's really a conversation where we have to be saying both. all children as children need to be given rights, and
Mhm.
also, look at the ways that this intersects with all of the other layers of oppression in our
Mhm.
society that people face.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what else? I don't want to end it on that one. Is there something, is there a cheerier direction we can end the conversation on? Like what have you loved about the work? What makes you hopeful about this work you're doing?
Yeah, I think I have a tendency to be a little bit burn the system down,
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you will.
Warm
And
our hands at the fire. Yep.
I'm working on, you know, looking and holding on to hope
Yeah.
um, as well. And this study really showed me that educators are out there doing this work. This is not
Yes.
um, something that no one wants.
Mhm.
This is something that people are begging for.
Mhm.
Begging to be seen as more human in their classroom, begging for their children to be able to control what they do in
Mhm.
their, 10-hour day in their centers. Um, and so I think that what I found was that these 10 women from all across the country were able to sit in this space together and breathe in a
Mhm.
way that was so connecting. And they were like, how can we feel so connected? Like I was a little bit worried coming into this. Um, but they were able to really pick up on each other's threads and unpack so much of this work
Mhm.
in a way that was both critical of what's happening and also incredibly powerful and hopeful
Mhm.
um, about, these little moments and how much they matter, how much any little moment in the classroom when we can make a small choice matters. I just read
Yeah.
something the other day and it was, a meme or whatever,
Uh-huh.
but it was saying, we worry so much about traveling back in time and making a small mistake that's going to ruin everything. But no one in the present thinks that a small choice could have a huge
Oh,
impact. And I
yeah,
was
I
like,
love it.
ooh,
Yeah.
okay. All right, Instagram.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the hope is hard sometimes, especially um, there's just so much happening that feels like it's working against our
Mhm.
work with young children.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to think about these
Yeah.
people who didn't know each other coming in to do what they thought was probably just like a dry survey and
Right.
some converse and some focus groups and have this community and this connection and find hope there.
Yeah.
That's really
And
cool.
so I think there's hope for us all in that. And then I think really holding on to the hope that those small changes can have a big impact
Hmm.
over time.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Well, is it going to be a book when you're all done? Are you going to do your get what you need out of it for your PhD, and then are you writing a book someday?
This is a
It's my
baby study.
question for
This is going to be
everybody.
my
Okay.
dissertation. Oh, this will is working towards being one or two published papers,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and
Cool.
then
I'll read a
then
paper.
I will do my
I'll accept a
dissertation.
paper.
Okay,
I just
and I'll
want
do
all
my
my
dissertation.
smart friends to write books.
Oh, speaking of writing books, Heather.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wrote one. It's out now. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be fully out and available. Yeah, thanks
So exciting.
for
You're
the
my
plug.
inspiration. I'm always just like, okay, Heather can sit down and write every day. You can sit down and write a
Oh,
little.
oh, oh, oh. I don't write every day. No, 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 no. Don't use me for that. That was
Oh, but you
actually,
think and you read every
yeah,
day.
I've got something percolating every day,
Yeah.
but I'm not one of those 5 in the morning sitting down with my writing. Actually, that feeling that I should be doing that, like actually physically writing things on paper or whatever, was a
Mhm.
huge barrier and kept me
Yeah.
from, like, I really felt like I was a failure because I wasn't doing that. I just had to find my own style, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Well,
I try to do a little bit of it, of something towards that project every day. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Emily. It's always so much fun and such a like a mental stretch to talk with you. Like it's very satisfying, very challenging.
oh, thank you for having me.
I'm excited that you're out there doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
too.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.